Every morning before the sun reached the valley, Elias climbed. He climbed before the village woke, before the market opened, before the children ran through the dusty roads, and before the voices of other people could tell him what was possible. At the edge of the village stood a mountain, dark, steep, and enormous. Its peak was hidden by clouds most days, as if the sky itself had decided that no one was meant to see what waited at the top. Elias had been told all his life that the mountain could not be climbed. His father had tried once and returned after 3 days with torn hands and an injured leg. His uncle had tried and never spoke about it again. The old men at the tea house laughed whenever someone mentioned the summit. "The mountain does not move," they said, "and neither does fate." But Elias could not forget the first time he saw it as a child. He had looked up at its peak and felt something strange. Not fear, exactly, but a question. What if it is not impossible? What if people simply stop too soon? So he began. The first day, he made it only a few hundred steps before slipping on loose stone. He fell hard, cut his palm, and returned home with blood on his clothes. The villagers saw him and shook their heads. "The mountain won," they said. Elias said nothing. The next morning, he climbed again. He fell again. The next day, he climbed farther. Then he fell farther. Weeks became months. His hands became rough. His legs became stronger. He learned which rocks held his weight and which ones crumbled beneath it. He learned that the mountain changed with the weather. He learned that fog could make a familiar path feel like a stranger. He learned that courage was not a loud feeling. Most days, courage was simply tying his boots when every part of him wanted to stay in bed. Still, he did not reach the top. One winter morning, after nearly a year of climbing, Elias reached a narrow ledge high above the valley. The wind struck him so fiercely that he had to press his body against the stone. Below him, his village looked tiny. He could see the road where he had grown up. He could see the roof of his home. He could see the tea house where people had laughed at him, and then he looked up. The summit was still far away. For the first time, Elias felt defeated. He had given everything to this climb, his strength, his time, his hope, and the mountain still stood above him, unmoved. He sat on the ledge as the cold entered his bones. "What is the point?" he whispered. "The mountain has not changed at all." An old voice answered from behind him. "It was never supposed to." Elias turned. An old woman stood a few steps away, wrapped in a weathered cloak. He had never seen her on the trail. "The mountain does not need to change," she said. "You do." Elias looked at his bleeding hands, his worn boots, his exhausted body. "I am still not at the top." "No," she said, "but look at the person who made it here." He looked down at the valley again. The boy who had first stared at the mountain would never have reached this ledge. That boy would have been afraid of the wind. He would have turned back at the first cut, the first storm, the first voice telling him he was foolish. But Elias was no longer that boy. The mountain had not become smaller. He had become stronger. The next morning, he did not climb because he was certain he would reach the summit. He climbed because he understood something deeper. A person is not measured only by the moment they arrive. They are measured by every time they refuse to abandon the road. Years later, Elias reached the top. There was no crowd waiting, no trumpet sounded, no one in the village knew the exact moment his hand touched the final stone. At the summit, he found no treasure chest, no secret kingdom, no magical answer. Only the sky, only the wind, only the vast valley below. And in that silence, he realized the truth. The greatest victory was not standing above the mountain. It was becoming the kind of person who could stand there. When Elias returned to the village, the old men at the tea house asked him what he had found at the top. He smiled. "I found out," he said, "that the mountain was never my enemy." Then he looked toward the path, where a young girl stood staring up at the clouds. And before anyone could tell her it was impossible, Elias walked over and said, "You do not have to climb the whole mountain today. You only have to take the next step.